Nice to be here again. It really is.
Bankruptcy is a word that a lot of people hear, but they don't exactly know what it means. What does bankruptcy mean?
It's simply a question of reducing debt, okay? You can reorganize under most of the chapters of the code, or you can simply liquidate and walk away from your debts. It's a fresh start program. Okay?
Now, in today's troubled economy, what financial issues should people be most aware of right now?
They should be most aware of their mortgages, okay? What's been going on lately is you may have seen a few months back the banks all announced that they were making record profits. But the way they made their record profits was to get rid of their losses. And to get rid of their losses, they set up these satellite companies. So a lot of people are in the mail getting notices that their mortgage has been sold to some company with a strange name that appears to be located nowhere. What that is they've created these entities off book that they push these mortgages into. So you got to be careful that your payments are going to the right place and that the person who's getting them is charging them and crediting them to your account. If you don't watch that, you may have a lot of trouble.
Well, why wouldn't it go to the right place if you're notified this is who you now send your mortgage payment to?
Well, you would think that, but
yeah,
particularly with companies like Bank of America, payment schedules have gotten lost or they were never there in the first place. So the new entity is trying to muddle through the bad paperwork they've got. So you need to be careful. You need to be sure that they've got everything and that you've got an accounting. Now, the government, for many years now, has had a statute that we refer to as RESPA. It's a real estate act that allows you to ask the lender to give you an accounting for your mortgage for a period of time. So you can say, hey, please give me a printout of the last 5 years of my mortgage, what payments I've made and where you've credited them to.
Okay. I understand right now that bankruptcies are down in the United States of America.
They are through the floor. They're about 20% of where they were at the high point.
And why is that?
Well, we've been down so long that the need to file bankruptcy has disappeared pretty much from most people's radar. What happens is you get a lot of bankruptcies when the things are going down, and you get a lot of bankruptcies when things are going up. And we're just sitting around at the bottom pretty much.
Now, before going on there, we're talking about Donald Trump, and he is sort of brought the topic.
He's a bankruptcy lawyer's dream. He's a repeat customer, and he's filed 4 corporate bankruptcies.
Tell us about the Donald Trump bankruptcies.
Well, he seems to get in trouble with hotels and gambling facilities because the first one was the Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And then he went through another large one with Trump International Resorts, which was another gambling sort of hotel operation. His big problem seems to be he does a lot of personal guaranteeing. He's lost hundreds of millions of dollars on those personal guarantee. He's the dream of the bankruptcy lawyer because you always need that guy coming in who's on the hook because he's the guy who will push the case and move it along and has something to lose.
Now, you were sharing with me the other day that people should watch out for their investments right now. You consider the stock market to be very risky in today's economy? Well,
it is because, the banks haven't actually cured their problem. They've pushed it off over the next 20 years or 30 years or something like that. So they're marginally solvent and they're living on governmental life support. If for some reason that was cut off at any point in time, they would drop and they would pull the market down with them.
Now, when you file for bankruptcy, there are different types of bankruptcy that you can file for. What about filing for Chapter 7?
Most people file for 7. If you don't have any...
Why is that?
Well, most people in this society today don't have a lot of assets that are unencumbered. In other words, you don't have a lot of real estate property free or savings accounts that are at risk. Also, the state of New York, in our state, has tripled the exemption. So most people don't own enough property to fall above the exemption. So they file a 7. They liquidate all their unsecured debt, their credit cards, mortgage deficiencies, car repossessions, whatever. That goes. And they're left with just their assets to go forward and rebuild their lives.
And what are the assets that they're left with that they can go forward with?
Their house, their car, their insurance, life insurance, health insurance, $11,000 in cash.
What about filing for Chapter 13 bankruptcy?
13 is a more powerful statute. It allows you to reorganize your secured debt along with your unsecured debt. Okay. It also allows you to hold up your student loans. So most people in society today who are really in need of bankruptcy need it for a student loan, but student loans don't discharge bankruptcy. 13, however, will hold it up, allow you to get back on your feet, and work out some kind of payment arrangement for the student loans.
What about the mortgage modifications going on right now?
You can do those both in 7 and 13, and they've been very successful. They started out at 40% success rate, and they're moving up to 60 and 70% success rates. I'm surprised sometimes. I look at things, I say, that's a hopeless mortgage, and the bank comes in and comes up with a workout. Particularly now when you got it off the books and it's on somebody else's books and they are desperately trying to make some money.
What are some of the alternatives to mortgage modifications?
Sitting there, letting them foreclose the house and not paying for it. Because a lot of people are doing that. When the house is seriously underwater, you can ride out the system. It takes at least 2 years to foreclose a house. And during that period, you have to pay for the mortgage or the property taxes. In fact, property taxes are probably the biggest issue we have right now in this area because they're at least 1/3 of the mortgage payment monthly. And so even if I can modify the mortgage, I still have to modify the property taxes in order to make it work.
I was talking with a member of the New York State Assembly earlier, and he was talking about the fact that property taxes in some municipalities are forcing people who own their houses and don't have a mortgage to move out because the property taxes are just out of this world.
Amsterdam, Schenectady, Troy.
Green Island.
Green Island, yep. Not so much. Green Island is still Albany, and Albany is still a little bit lower.
What about tax liabilities in bankruptcy? How can one discharge tax
Income taxes can be discharged if they're old enough. So you really need to sit down with an expert to figure out if the tax can be discharged. And if it can't, it can still be scheduled in a 13 or a Chapter 11, which stops the interest and the penalties running. Very often the people can pay the tax, they just can't pay the interest and the penalty.
In the past couple of years, the Internal Revenue Service seems to have developed a dubious reputation. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Actually,
or is that another show?
Well, that you say that, but then I know all these people there, and we're friends, and we get along really well. So it's kind of hard for me to say that they're not nice people. They are great people. I think there's a big disconnect in that agency between the top of the agency and the people who work there. I think most of the people who work there are very good. Now, some of them are a little bit harsh on collections. That's why when you find yourself with dealing with a difficult collection, you need to see an attorney because the attorney can move it to a different platform. In my case, I move it to the bankruptcy platform. The bankruptcy people are just wonderful.
Now, you talked about higher up. Sometimes it seems like the IRS higher-ups have targeted certain people or certain organizations. That's the word.
I don't know that. I mean, you say that, but
no, I've
often thought if I were doing it, I wouldn't go looking to get people who obviously don't have any money. I'd be looking at the people who have the money to see if I can collect some of it.
How are people doing with student loans? One time you told me something astounding, that people will retire from a career and they still haven't paid off their student loans.
Yes, that's still the case. That's still the case. It's a little bit less now than it was, but too many people have got student loans that just have never gone away. Now, most of those people don't understand that there is a program that the federal government runs. They don't make it easy to get into it, but it's there. You can get into an income-based repayment plan, and eventually, if you can't pay it off in the 10 or 20 years they allow, then it's just forgiven.
What is that specific program that the federal government has?
It's called income-based repayment payment. And what you got to do is go on the Department of Ed site, type in income-based repayment, and you'll see a page will come up, and it's over on the right. And you got to click on the box, and you got to get the forms, you got to fill them out, and you got to file them, and you got to do it every year, which is a pain in the neck, but you got to do it every year.
Agriculture, a very important business in the capital region and all of New York State, and actually the nation. Is there a special bankruptcy for farmers?
12s, and you know that. Yeah, and I'm the Chapter 12 attorney, and lately I've been getting a lot of people calling me up on that because there are a lot of people in farm situations But lately, the argument has been about eligibility. And the eligibility is very tricky in 12, and you really have to have an attorney to do a 12. You can't do it without it. It's worse than an 11. You can't even think about a 12 without an attorney.
Speaking of having an attorney, and one of the things that has always impressed me about you is the one thing you do when people sit down to talk with you is you calm them down and say, we can work this out, it will all turn out well. There are a lot of people who think they can do it without dealing with an attorney, and that's sort of a big mistake, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I was telling somebody earlier that we now have these very sophisticated programs that, you spend thousands of dollars buying them, and literally you can fill it in, and it will eliminate the need for the attorney. The problem is it doesn't allow you to take everything you're entitled to, and 1 in 10 cases is going to produce something that's going to cause all kinds of problems.
And why would they set up a program like that?
Because a few years back, what happened is everybody and their brother was getting into the bankruptcy business because times were bad, and everybody said, well, bankruptcy is the place to be. And very few attorneys know anything about bankruptcy. It's just one of those odd little things that maybe 1 in 100 attorneys knows bankruptcy.
What are some of the best alternatives to bankruptcy proceedings, if there are any?
Workouts. There are those who said that Mr. Trump didn't explore workouts enough, but even individuals can do that. They can call their creditors up and try to get something. There's an art to it, though. Okay, and I know some people have done it very, very successfully, but it takes a certain attitude to do it.
Does bankruptcy discharge state and federal and local taxes?
The property taxes attached to the property, so you don't actually have any obligation to pay those, okay? If they take the property, you don't have any tax liability. The income taxes, if they're over 3 years old, they probably are dischargeable. But if you owe sales tax, it's not in the state of New York. Now, however, people come in all the time, and they used to live in California, and they ran a small business, and they have sales tax from California. That is dischargeable. And that's why you need an attorney, because only somebody who's worked in this field for 20 or 30 years knows that there's a difference between California taxes and New York taxes.